Okay, we're going to continue with the Rebbe's Maamar Padah Besholom from the year 9, Tavshin Lamed Zayin, 5,737, 1976 at the end. And we're going slowly through the Maamar. It's a Maamar that said of Padah Besholom Nafshi on the Yortzeit, on the Yom HaGeula, Day of Redemption of the Mittel Rebbe, which follows the Yortzeit of the Mittel Rebbe, which is incidentally falls out this week. On Friday night Shabbos is the birth in Yortzeit, and the Chag HaGeula, the Day of Redemption, follows on Yud Kislev, as it fell out on the first year, where the Mittel Rebbe was notified that he was freed on Tes, but he actually was freed on Sunday. And we're talking about the idea of Padah Besholom, that a person has to. The idea is to tap into your Yechidah Benefesh, your essence of your soul, the part that has no counterpart, and then you could have what's called a Padah Besholom, a redemption in peace, where there's no adversary, where you're running on such a level where there's no level of impurities. Babua de babua leslahu. There's no shadow of a shadow that is counter to the essence of the soul. So seemingly that's an avodah that's happening when Mashiach comes, but because everything that happens in Mashiach's time has to have some sort of connection to our times, especially the end of the time of Galus has to be connected with, so to say, the beginning of the time of Geula, of redemption. So a person has to be able to tap into that energy. And the way we do it is through the Avodah this week that we learned by Yaakov, who did his Avodah through Tzon. Tzon is the Avodah of humility, of bittul. And through the Tzon Lavan, through the sheep of Lavan, that was the foundation. Everything comes from that. It means Vahili Shor V'Chamor Eved V'Shivcha. This that Yaakov says that I have oxen and donkeys and maidservants and male servants. It's all because he had Tzon, because he had sheep. Like Rashi says in today's Chitas, that Yaakov sold the sheep for a lot of money, and from that he went and bought other things. But the foundation was that you expand, like it says, when you have the bittul, your nafshi, your soul is like dirt, then you can open up the Torah. Okay, so we're going to continue learning about the idea of the Tzon. What does it mean, the avodah of bittul, that's represented by the sheep? Then Yaakov wanted to be dealing with the sheep of Lavan. And we spoke about the idea that it has to be specifically Lavan's sheep, because the idea that we're learning about, that Yaakov wanted to get in touch with the idea of Loven ha'elyon, the idea of a nashik Loven, as Espanov, that Loven, the high level of Loven, how he empowers and gives, how mamshech he brings down to both the masculine and the feminine, both the mashpia and the makabel, to be able to work on that high level. Because Loven ha'elyon is beyond Seidish Tashlus. It's the simplicity, the pshitus that has no definition. So now he's coming to trying to we're putting all the pieces together. So Yuvan Zeh will understand in Tzon, what is the idea of the sheep? The Hegdim Hadis of the Medrash, we find the Medrash teaches like this: that Basar Mekoymes Nimni Yisrael. We find the Jewish people counted 10 times. The Echad L'Asalavai, and we're going to also have the time that we're going to be counted when Mashiach comes, where it says that Oid Tavarna Hatzorna Demoina, that the sheep are going to pass through the one who counts. Tavarna, like the sheep that go through, and you have to count the sheep for Meiser, etc. So too the Jewish people are going to go through like this sheep. They'll be counted by way of the person, the one who counts. So what does this mean? We have to explain. If we're talking about the different times the Jewish people are counted, and the counting the Jewish people symbolizes a level of achievement of the Jewish people. Therefore, we find that the counting is done at certain times. So we have to assume and know and be certain that the counting, when it's going to be when Mashiach comes, is the highest level of counting, because we're in the highest moment of the time of Geula, of redemption. We know that the idea of counting, we have in the beginning of a midbar, that's called the book of Numbers, right? So the idea of counting is a great thing on its own. All the Rebbe talks about the idea of counting, how it elevates the one who's counted. And many times, specifically in Sefer Bekudim, the book of counting of Numbers, that when we want to talk about what does it mean to how does one go about counting the Jewish people, It says Su'as Reish, lift the head. So we see that counting is an elevation of the head, not just an elevation of the person, but in the head itself, which is the highest point of the person, is elevation of the head, and that's how one is. What's accomplished through counting. So we see that the counting is a great thing. Of Su'as Reish B'nai Yisrael, lift up the head of the Jewish people. Ukedaim or other terms that are similar in idea. V'hainu, meaning to say, Shemedur B'Oidis B'nai Yisrael. We're talking about the Jewish people, not just anyone who's being counted. And when the Jewish people are counted, it affects, and like he says in Yiddish, as das den nemt, it affects, and so to say elevates, gamas hareish b'nei Yisrael. So it's not just su'as reish b'nei Yisrael, it's not just accounting the Jewish people, but it reaches even the highest level of the Jewish people, which is represented by the head. Even higher, the Rebbe says. Because it's not just that you count the heads, but it's a su'as reish, elevate the head. Hisnasus, elevation. And we say, like it says in other expression, is the gilgaloisam to their skulls. We know that the gilgalis, the skull, represents outside the moichin, the keser, the idea of the crown. So everything gets elevated. The highest points of the Jewish people get elevated through counting. And after the Jewish people were counted 9 times throughout history, again, there's other times they're counted by King David, etc. And now we're holding the 10th, and the 10th is the highest number. Moving is understood. Is the highest level, just like we have the 10 Shira, the Oz Yoshir, the Shira Hashem Shir Chadash is going to be with Mashiach. That the 10th song is masculine. We have the 10th Paraduma. These are all the number 10 that come together with Mashiach. And the 10th counting is obviously the highest level of counting. So there says, moving, it's the highest level. The Alpha became, nevertheless. Sorry, I just have to bring. The Alpha became, nevertheless, he says, the Achashir, Mechashir, Medrash, Tishishrov, Kuchbruchim, Bidukma La'avu Bain. So after it says, sorry, we have to, I skipped over here. The Alpha became, sorry, this Alpha became, nevertheless, Mevi Makosiv. What does the pasuk say? That how the Jewish people can be counted like sheep through the counter. So sheep is seemingly not a high level. How can we say that the 10th time, which is the highest level of counting, is to be like sheep that are counted? That we're going to be called like sheep, and it's referring to the time the Jewish people are going to be counted like the sheep are counted by the counter, by the moiner. And same thing we find in another medrash. We spoke about before Hashanah, there we spoke about that year. And it says, the God's going to be to me like a father, and we will be to him like a child. And then we're going from lower up. And then we see even higher, he will be for me as his shepherd. I'll be like God's sheep. So we see that as high as the relationship between father and son, we're saying even a higher level, that God is going to be like a shepherd, and we're going to be to him like a sheep. So we see that there's a very high madrega, high level of what's represented in the sheep. And because it's an elevation, and in this statement of the Medrash, the Rebbes have taught, like we said, how could we compare the sheep and the shepherd to the father and son? There's no connection. The difference is so huge. The Alpha became, nevertheless, when counting upwards, after we say that the Jewish people's relationship to God is like a father and son, Ani l'doidi, I'm to my beloved, v'doidi li. We say even higher, a higher level of connection and relationship. So we say Ani l'doidi, v'doidi li. Then Haroya, which is the idea of being a shepherd, Shoshanim amongst the roses, and the idea of that Hashem is like a roya, he's our shepherd, and we're his son, we're his sheep, is even harder in the relationship with father and son. What's that mean? But based on explain, so we see that there's a huge amount. The Rebbe is showing over here that there's a huge madrega, the level of the Jewish people being like sheep and God being like our shepherd. So what's it mean? Rabbi calls it. The meaning is like this. As is explained by the Mittel Rebbe, the Baal HaGeula, the one who is his redemption, which is this Matzah Shabbos Sunday of the Mittel Rebbe, following his birthday on Shabbos. The Inyan at Tzoin, what does it mean? Tzoin, the word Tzoin comes, is rooted in the word Yitzia, to go out. And what do we have again in this today's Chitas, meaning Thursday's Chitas? It says that the sons of Lavan were envious and had an evil eye towards Yaakov, because they said, Me'asher la'avinu, that where did Yaakov get all this wealth from? Me'asher la'avinu, he took it from our father. Asa, he made his kol ha'kavod hazeh hatzoin. All this kavod, all this wealth, the word kavod in this place means wealth, is he took it from Lavan's son, from Lavan's sheep. The Avinu Kaya Lavan, like we said before, that who's our father? Our father's Lavan, which is in Kedusha, that's Lavan Ali, in the simplicity of the white. In Yimuva Mizeh, She'inin HaYetzia, Bechinas Tzoin, V'Yetzia, Bechinas Lavan Ali, in K'maishu B'm Kaimai. So what is the idea of Tzoin? That the Tzoin leave, from the word Yetzia, are leaving, Mi'avinu, so what are the sons of Lavan saying? The pasuk is, although the pasuk is talking in a negative the way it is in this world, but it's also a statement about the relationship between Yaakov and Lavan. That Lavan, which is Lavan Ali in the simplicity of white, above, say, the Shalashos, like we said yesterday, so he goes from there, Yitzia, he's leaving it. Where are you leaving from? And when you say, I'm leaving, where are you leaving from? So if Tzoin means to leave, to go out of, where are you going out from? You're going out from the level of Lavan Ali. It means he's taking from that highest level. What does it mean to leave? He's going out from Lavan Ali, because the sons are saying, where did Yaakov get these Tzon, these sheep? This Yitzia, where did he go out of to become who he is? From our father, Lavan. As Lavan is in his space, means not the way he lowers himself down. That was the whole avodah of Yaakov. You know that Yaakov's point is there's certain people that their avodah is in the space. Yaakov's whole emphasis is Mavriach HaTichon. It's brought down in, I think Rashi brings it down before the Mishkan, that the Mavriach HaTichon, the piece of the connecting pole that connected all the beams of the Mishkan, Yaakov Avinu planted. Because Yaakov Avinu's, that's his thing. His idea is to bring the Yud into Akev, the highest level of Hashem's name into the heel, to connect the highest level to the lowest level. So he's bringing that. So the idea is Yaakov. That was the whole purpose of Yaakov's avodah. Lahamshich, to take from the highest concealment. There's nothing too high for Yaakov. It's not just that Yaakov can experience something high. He's not into experiencing a thing where it is. It's Yitzia. Take it from where it is and bring it down. Yaakov has to connect. It's Tiferes. Tiferes is taking chesed and gevura, severity and kindness, and blending it to something beautiful. That's why we have the whole thing with the Nikudim, Akudim, Brudim, all this, the dreams, all this. We see in Yaakov's these complicated parts of the Torah is all about this idea of Mavriach HaTichon, of connecting. Mavriach HaTichon again means to connect from the highest point to the lowest point. So that's what Yaakov's avodah is. Ahamshich mibchinas hahelem, to take from the most concealed space. But b'chinas helem atzma, k'may kamer madregas, and in concealment there's deeper and deeper of things that are concealed. Yeshem b'chinas helem stam. There's something that's just not revealed, and there's something that's essentially concealed. Helem atzmi means that its whole essence is that it's concealed. It's not something you have something that's revealed; it's just not revealed to you. You have something that's being concealed. You have something that is, but its definition is that it's concealed. And Yaakov, you take something that its definition is to. I mean, imagine what we're saying here. Something that it's what is helem atzmi, the most defined level of concealment, and he says that's not. It doesn't stay concealed. The Rebbe used to say things like that. The Rebbe would say, I don't know if this is exactly a connection, but the Rebbe would say that he said whenever the Frierdiker Rebbe would tell him something, and so the Rebbe would say that I'm a repeat offender. That you have to know that the Frierdiker Rebbe had to know if he's going to tell me something, I'm going to repeat it. Because the Rebbe was not going to listen to a story or an idea from the Frierdiker Rebbe and hold it in. The Rebbe said it was known. If you're going to tell it to me, I'm going to repeat it. Why? Because if it's something that's there, he has to repeat. He has to teach it to someone else. The Rebbe has to teach it to someone else. So here he says, from Yaakov's avodah is mibchinas helem and helem atzmi, so in primis Torah. Which what does this mean in Avodah? What does this mean in Giluyim, in godliness? It means the most inner secrets of Torah. Like we said also that Yaakov, we learned last week that the bracha of Yaakov was Yigiyah Torah. That the Vayitin L'chalekim wasn't because he would get Torah anyways. The bracha from Yitzchak was Yigiyah Torah, the toiling in Torah. The dachken lemil de chachmusa, to toil. When you toil, you get to the depth of the wisdom. The Maamar behemshech, as Mevor is explained in Tafir Samachmov Baruch at length. Misham ha'isa bechinas hayitzia, and that he left from the essential concealment, Shepha Yaakov Avodah, to bring it down through his avodah. So what's Yaakov doing? He's taking something that has no real connection, essentially, with the chain of creation and bringing it into the chain of creation. And the whole definition of something that's concealed, that it has nothing to do. It's concealed from the whole Seder Shlach, the whole chain of creation. So be more so if he's taking something that's essentially concealed. And therefore you can't define it. Because at the end of the day is that a son and a father have a biological relationship. It makes sense. The father gives the connection between the father and the son is the father the son is taking from the father. So there you could say that's when within the boundary you say Chachma Bina, you say from wisdom into midos, because there's a connection. That the bechinas hahelam gavoyim liyais be'erach because Yaakov is tapping into it's much higher than the relationship of father and son, and therefore he's going to explain that's why it's called the shepherd and the sheep, because with regard to the helam, this high level of concealment, the verse says gam ben v'ach ein, there's no son, there's no brother, there's no relationship. The only connection is like the connection between a shepherd and a sheep. There's no biological relationship between the shepherd and the sheep. There's something very unique in the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep that even other animals don't have. Even the ox and the donkey don't. Even though the shor could have the yoke, it could plow. The chamor could carry loads. It was the old traveler, the one who carried the truck. The sheep are not going to plow, and the sheep are not going to schlep. They're not going to carry. But there is one component that the sheep has deeper than anyone else, is the nullification, the subservient character of the sheep to the shepherd. No other animal is on that level. There's no struggle. There's a system. The system of the sheep, the shepherd, the guiding sheep. The halacha, it says in Yisrael that you want to sell a flock of sheep, you just sell the sheep that guides, and that's it. Everything goes with it. Why? Because automatically, if once you sell the sheep that's the leading sheep, all the other sheep are going to follow. It's automatic. That's kind of bittul, self-nullification. Our bittul Tzon the self-nullification that the sheep have to the shepherd, who now the yosem bittul shar behemoths. No other animal has that. The shar chayos, especially not the beasts that are wild, but even domestic animals don't. You need to get to the essential concealment. You can't use a character. You have to have something that its whole definition is bittul. The only vessel, the only tool that could reach so deep and take and you'd see and bring it so low is self-multiplication when there's no agenda. In Avodah, this means there's nothing. It's all about bittul. Bittul is such a strong tool because the very fact that you have nothing, no agenda mixed in there, no personal interest in this, you're totally nullified to the cause. There's no limit to how much you could, how deep, from how deep you could take, how low you could take it to. Last come even more so, if you want to take from essential concealment, not just concealment, but self-elevation, means the highest level of godliness. What do you have to hold? What's going to help it? How could you possess something so deep? Never mind, bring it down. What could be the vessel to something like that? What avodah could you do? There's nothing. You said that you have a vessel like that. By definition, concealment it's closed up. There could be no connection to vessels. So if there is a vessel, what could that vessel be? Especially if we're talking about Helam Atzmi, in essential concealment. You see that bittul. That's the power of bittul. Bittul is not just. This shows you this what the Rebbe is saying over here. And what's a very interesting thing in other Maamar, the Rebbe asks, if that's the case, so why is the sheep not why is the sheep not the representative of the domestic animal on the Merkava? In the Maamar of Sfiras Omer, the Alter Rebbe talks about this week's parsha. It says that the Yaakov separated the sheep, and the Alter Rebbe goes the whole idea between Kesef and Keves, and switching the sin and the vase. So the Alter Rebbe says, with all the milas, all the uniqueness, all the power of bittul, but when you have to talk about that's a component of avodah. But when you have to talk about who's going to be the representative of the domestic animals, the shore is the ox, because that's what it is. We have the ox, lion, human, and eagle. Those are the four essential beings that represent the chayis and the life force, including the human. So, as great as this bittul is, still at the end of the day, when you have to talk what represents the essential animal, essential domestic animal, it's the ox. But nevertheless, there's an avodah of bittul that's so important, and therefore, in this case, it's the animal of it's the vessel of use, because when you want to get from the highest level to bring it down, that's only through bittul. It's like a lot of times you have certain people. Like this idea is also explained the difference between the nesichim, the princes, and the roya and the shepherd. The B'chnina ben Daisis, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that when he wanted to be healed, he was sick. He sent a message to B'chnina ben Dosa, and he got healed. And his wife was offended. How could it be that B'chnina ben Dosa could get you healed and you can't? Famous thing that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said: even if I put my head between my legs all day, I won't be able to be effective as B'chnina ben Dosa. Why? Because B'chnina ben Dosa had bittul. He was tzaddik on a very high level. But when it comes to who's the Nasi, who's leading the Jewish people, that was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So there's certain components that are very high. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said that the difference between me and Rabbi Yochanan ben Dais is like a servant who sits by the king, who has total access, and I'm like a minister. The minister can always go in, but the minister runs things. So when you have to say who represents the domestic animal kingdom, that's the shor, that's the ox. But there's a component that the ox doesn't have, and that's the bittul of the keves, of the kesef of the sheep. That just finished this paragraph. So he says, again, what is the vessel? If you could even call that there's a vessel to take something that's concealed or essentially concealed, is a dafka habitl. The asdaka v'shval ruach, like the pasuk says, only the shval ruach, the broken, humble person, is where God rests, and you can have the Shekhinah rests. Shaydeza who marim b'kadosh eshken, that's where the elevated level is ready to rest. It's not just even lower than the idea of the shval ruach, but in total nullification. In shval ruach means I'm just humble, I'm low, but total bittul, total self-nullification. And this is what we said before, that in the case of Yaakov, the essence, everything he got was from bittul. In this case, bittul was the essential kli. Like we said, that what was he wealthy with was bittul, because he was able to accomplish. And from that, he was able to take other things that had value: the shore, the ox, the donkey, the servants, etc. When he has total self-nullification. When you're not Tzon, that's represented by the sheep. Then he was able to get from the essential concealment. Is that oil, and that affected that Yaakov became very spiritually and materially wealthy. As is explained, that the idea of ma'od, like all your might, is the essential. That is the idea of concealment. To the essential concealment, which is by definition concealed. And he was able to bring it down. So in relation to Yitzia, My Yisr in Ma'oid HaBeis, Shemashatzon Eile Heim that not just that he was able to bring down away from the concealment, but he was actually able to bring the concealment itself down. Yaakov David does say through his service, through his avodah, bittul, it's self-nullification. The darka, he was able to Yaakov Darka, put it into his life. He was able to bring it down to this world all the way down. So Hashem will continue on Sunday. Again, we're very halfway through, so we should be able to finish this Maamar by next week. Have good Shabbos and good Yom Tov for you and Tes Kislev.